Welcome to the C# Programmer. In this video, we're going to be looking at pivot tables in Excel. Now, what exactly are pivot tables? So here we're going to be, I'm just going to give you a very easy description of pivot tables, which is tables that are used to analyze and summarize data. Now, we're going to be using a workbook, just like in all the other Excel videos, so that we can show what we're doing here. And this workbook can be downloaded using the link in the description below. Now we have a scenario here where a company has got so many stores around the world. So we have all this data. We've got the stores, which are described by the city. We've got the country, we've got the region, we've got the date, we've got the item, salesperson, list price, actual price, and discount. So what we want to do with this data is, firstly, we want to create a table that shows the total sales of each city. We secondly want to create a table that shows the total sales of each item. And thirdly, we want to create a table that shows the total revenue per item sold and country. So without further ado, let's dive right into the work. Now, to begin with, we're going to answer the first question, and we're going to create a worksheet for the first question. So we're simply going to add a worksheet, and we're simply going to rename it. So renaming, we can simply right click, we can simply double tap on the name of the worksheet, and we can simply call it question 1, like that. And now what we want to do is, I guess you can see you have tabs here. You've seen this tab so many times if you've used Excel. The first thing we want to do is want to click the cell where we want our pivot table to start from. So I'll pick A2, personal preference. So here we're simply going to say insert, and you can see all these tools here, but what we're looking for is a pivot table. So we simply go to pivot table and we say from table arrange. Now here we're simply going to select the table where our data is. So our data is in this worksheet. So while we're in here, while we're right there, we simply click data, and we're going to click A1, and then we're simply going to say Control A. All right, so that the whole table is highlighted. I guess you can see here the table name automatically appears. So if you have a custom table name, it's going to appear right there. We can now say OK, and we should have something that looks like this. Now, the first thing that we want to do is, obviously, yes, we should remember our equation. We are looking for the total sales of each city. So we have something here on our right. Okay, I guess you can see to say the columns that we're having on our data, on our table here, are the same columns that are showing when we come to this right part here. All right, so we're simply going to be dealing with rows and values and also columns in the next question, but in this question we're simply looking at the rows and values. So we want to display our cities as rows. All right, so we're simply going to drag our store. So I said the store is represented by the city, so we simply grab the store and throw it there under rows. All right, and then we're also going to insert our value here. So the value that we're looking for is simply the actual price. Okay, so we want to add the actual price here, so we're simply going to release there. Okay, and from there we have to make sure to say the option that is selected here. So we simply click there and we say value field settings. So we have to make sure to say the option that is selected is the sum, because we want to find the sum, the total sales of each city. All right, so that's okay, and there we have our pivot table. So I guess you can see our pivot table shows us, and it doesn't miss any of the values, and it also shows us the grand total. So that's all for question 1. we can go to the next question. We're simply going to insert another another worksheet, and we're simply going to double click and name it question 2. All right, so here we want to just go back to our questions and read question 2 again. So create a table that shows the total sales of each item. So let's go to our question 2 worksheet, and we're simply going to say insert pivot table from table range again, and we're using the same table. So we simply go to data, go to A1, simply, or we can click anywhere actually, and we can simply say Control A, which is highlight everything or select everything, and we're simply going to say OK. So in this case, since we're looking for the sales for each item, we're simply going to drag the item, and we can put it in columns, but it's just going to be too much for the columns going to the right. So that's why I'm using rows for such. So we simply drag that to rows, and I guess you can see we have our items. So if I dragged it to columns, this is what would have happened. Let's just remove this. So we can simply just click and say remove field, and let's try to take it to columns. So I guess you can see what I was talking about. Okay, we don't want that so much data to be in our columns. All right, so we can just undo, and we're going to drag back columns into the rows. Okay, and from there we're simply going to get the actual price and drag it to the values. All right, so I guess you can see we have the sum of the actual price for every item, and then we also have the grand total down there. All right, that should be very easy. Now let's look at a more something that is very little bit more complex, like question 3. So here in question 3, we're being told to create a table that shows the total revenue per item sold and country. So we want the total revenue of every item in every country. Okay, so what we're going to do is, first things first, as usual, let's create another worksheet that's going to be for question 3. All right, so question 3, and in this worksheet, we're simply doing the usual: insert a pivot table from table or range, and we're simply going to say we want to select our data. So we simply click anywhere in the table and say Control A, so that the whole table is highlighted. Table name is table 3, and we simply say OK. That shows up again. So now what we want is the total revenue per item sold and country. So we're simply going to say our actual price is what's going to be in the values there. All right, and now we want the items to be as to appear as our rows, and we also want our countries to appear as our columns. So there we have our data. So I guess you can see it's very easy to summarize and analyze data with pivot tables, and that's exactly what we have looked at in this video. Now in the next video, we're going to be looking at more advanced things that we can do with pivot tables, including filtering. So thank you for watching. See you in the next video.